The Arctic isn't just melting, it's turning into a prize that superpowers are rushing to claim. Russia has fired hypersonic missiles, China is mapping the ice with satellites, and the US lags with only 2 working icebreakers to monitor its 6,640-mile Alaskan coastline. Meanwhile, 1.7 trillion metric tons of methane locked in the permafrost could trigger climate chaos and steep price hikes. As nations fight for control over Arctic shipping lanes, routes that could change global trade, America's grip on Arctic security weakens. Let's expose on Politalysis how the frozen frontier could ignite the next global crisis and why the US may not be ready.
China is geographically a near Arctic state.
The United States is an Arctic nation.
These restrictions cannot stop us from this process, from exploring the Arctic.
In the Arctic, shrinking ice is opening up new shipping corridors, with the northern sea route slashing travel times between Asia and Europe by up to 40%. If these Arctic routes fall under rival control, everyday Americans could see higher shipping costs, meaning pricier groceries and bigger hits to your paycheck. What was once locked under ice is now a gold mine, and the world's superpowers are circling like wolves. Beneath its icy shell lies untapped riches, 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its natural gas. These reserves could mean cheaper energy, or sky-high fuel prices if foreign powers lock the US out. But this isn't about trade or resources. It's about control, dominance, and survival. Russia's digging in, NATO is scrambling, and China's eyes are fixed on the Polar Silk Road, a key component of the Belt and Road Initiative, explored in depth in our other video on the channel. Meanwhile, melting permafrost threatens to release catastrophic methane emissions, and indigenous communities face erasure. And then there's the fight over shipping routes. The Northern Sea Route, cutting 15 days off travel between Europe and Asia, is a gold mine for profits. In 2022, over 1,611 ships braved these waters, and the numbers are climbing. But as traffic grows, so do questions. Who controls these routes? Who enforces the rules? Who pockets the profits? The Arctic is becoming the next global battleground, one where ice and ambition collide. For the United States, this region is no longer just a distant frontier. It's a critical hotspot. By 2024, the U.S. Department of Defense rolled out a sweeping Arctic strategy, aiming to counter the bold moves of Russia and China. The focus? Expanding surveillance, boosting military strength, and teaming up with Arctic allies to guard vital national interests. What's happening beneath the surface? Reports hint at secrets buried in the Arctic's icy depths. Analysts warn of Russia's mysterious under-ice operations, suggesting hidden bases and military gear camouflaged beneath frozen waters. Some claim China's research stations double as covert monitoring hubs, tracking U.S. and allied activities. A game-changing moment came in July 2024 with the creation of the Icebreaker Collaboration Effort, or ICE Pact. This alliance between the US, Canada, and Finland focuses on building icebreaker ships, essential for patrolling the increasingly navigable Arctic waters. These ships are not just a response to Russia and China's growing presence, but a statement. The US and its partners are here to stay. Russia operates over 40 icebreakers, while China, though far from the Arctic, now has 3 and plans for more. In comparison, the U.S. lags with only 2 operational icebreakers. This disparity fuels the urgency behind the ICE Pact, which aims to produce at least 6 new ships by 2030, boosting Arctic readiness. Yet, the melting ice reveals more than open waters. It exposes the divide between fact and speculation. Are Russia and China simply expanding their reach, or is there a hidden strategy at play? The Arctic is no longer just a frozen wasteland. It's a stage where nations flex their might, weaving plans in the shadows of its thawing expanse. What does the future hold in this shifting theater of ice and intrigue? Beneath the surface, oil and gas fields wait to be tapped. In 2023, Russia pumped 17.4 million tons of liquefied natural gas from the Yamal Peninsula, with China as one of its biggest buyers. With energy demand rising and resources dwindling, China's foothold in the frozen north signals a calculated move to dominate future energy markets. But China's ambitions stretch far beyond gas. China's plans to launch a satellite monitoring system reveal a larger strategy. These satellites won't just monitor ice, they'll map the Arctic like never before, ensuring Chinese ships sail safely through the icy waters. Think of it as China laying digital claim to a region that's long been untamed. This technology, combined with China's push for the Polar Silk Road under its Belt and Road Initiative, spells a dramatic shift in global shipping. By slashing travel times by 30 to 40%, China could reshape global trade routes, leaving competitors scrambling to keep up. You see, Arctic sovereignty, the authority and control nations wield over the Arctic's territories, resources, and economic activities, is at the heart of this issue. Yet none of this can move forward without Russia. China depends on Russia's fleet of icebreakers and its unmatched Arctic know-how to bring this vision to life. However, this alliance stirs unease. Skeptics argue that China's growing footprint in the Arctic chips away at the region's sovereignty, fueling geopolitical frictions that Western nations are keenly watching. Russia has taken the Arctic by storm, building more military bases than any other country. It runs 13 airfields, ready to launch planes for spying, defense, or quick action in this frozen frontier. These airfields aren't just outposts, they're watchtowers, giving Russia eyes over the Arctic's vast, icy wilderness. But that's not all. Russia also controls 16 deep-water ports, perfect for docking massive ships, storing weapons, and supporting warships. These ports are more than parking spots. They're footholds, preparing Russia for a future where melting ice could turn the Arctic into a busy highway for trade. And then there's Russia's icebreaker fleet, over 40 powerful ships designed to smash through thick ice. Leading the charge are nuclear-powered giants that can cut paths through ice as thick as 6.5 feet. These beasts don't just clear the way, they announce Russia's strength. While other nations hesitate, Russia charges ahead, locking down control of Arctic waters and the resources buried beneath. The question now is, how far will Russia go, and will the rest of the world let it? Russia's military power show doesn't stop with parades or flashy headlines. It's much more alarming. The Kremlin has fired hypersonic Zircon missiles in the Arctic, weapons so fast they tear through the sky at 9 times the speed of sound. These missiles aren't just quick, they're nearly impossible to stop, raising serious concerns among Western defense experts. Adding to this arsenal, Russia commands 11 nuclear-powered submarines, lurking beneath the icy waters like silent predators. 8 of these submarines patrol Arctic seas, making the region feel more like Moscow's backyard than neutral territory. Meanwhile, NATO scrambles to keep pace. Finland, NATO's newest member, strengthens its position with 285,000 trained reservists and the elite Jaeger Brigade, masters of Arctic combat. NATO isn't standing still. It has launched 2024 war games in Norway, mixing high-tech satellite surveillance with boots on frozen ground. But here's the catch. Critics claim NATO's efforts are all over the place. Without a clear plan, some fear its moves might do more harm than good, pushing tensions higher in a region already on edge. With both sides digging in, the Arctic is no longer just a frozen wasteland. It's a ticking time bomb. NATO is facing a serious problem that just keeps growing. Even though Finland and Sweden have officially joined the alliance, NATO's foothold in the Arctic still looks weak compared to Russia's overwhelming presence. A recent 2024 report painted a grim picture, warning that NATO troops simply aren't ready for Arctic warfare. Experts didn't hold back. They said NATO soldiers would likely face deadly losses if war ever broke out in the icy north. The United States has tried to respond by sending bombers and running military exercises in Norway, but critics argue it's too little, too late. Russia has already built massive bases, stocked weapons, and stationed troops in the region, leaving NATO scrambling to catch up. The Arctic is in big trouble as the ice melts. It's letting out gases from the ground that make the Earth heat up even faster. Animals like polar bears are losing their homes, and fish are moving to new places, making it hard for people who live there. Oil spills could also hurt the water and animals for a long time. The people who have lived in the Arctic for centuries are struggling as their land changes and their way of life disappears. This shows why we need to protect the Arctic now. The loud voices of corporations and governments, hungry to tap into the Arctic's untapped resources, often drown out the desperate pleas of those who call this fragile land home. It's a battle for survival, and every passing year raises the stakes, as melting ice opens the floodgates for resource exploitation and environmental decay. But the Arctic isn't just disappearing, it's being carved up. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea allows countries to claim waters stretching 350 nautical miles from their coasts. Yet, the fine print has sparked chaos. The Arctic is no quiet snowfield. It's a battleground of overlapping claims and high stakes. Picture this: 5 nations, Russia, Canada, Denmark via Greenland, Norway, and the United States, all fighting for a slice of this icy treasure trove. Why? Because the melting ice lies a staggering 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its untapped natural gas. That's billions of barrels of oil and trillions of cubic feet of gas, enough to power entire countries for decades. Russia's been making bold moves, planting its flag on the Arctic seabed in 2007 and claiming vast areas as part of its continental shelf. Canada and Denmark aren't sitting still, with both submitting overlapping claims to UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, to extend their control beyond 200 nautical miles. Even the U.S. is flexing its muscles, conducting military exercises and scientific surveys to secure its own Arctic stake. This isn't just about resources. As sea routes like the Northern Sea Route and the Northwest Passage open up, nations are scrambling to control these new shipping highways. In 2021 alone, traffic through the Northern Sea Route doubled compared to previous years, cutting shipping times between Europe and Asia by nearly 40%. That's billions of dollars in trade and influence on the line. But here's the catch. Amid all this scrambling, indigenous communities are being sidelined. These people have called the Arctic home for thousands of years, yet their voices are often drowned out by political games and corporate greed. The thawing ice threatens their hunting grounds, disrupts ecosystems they depend on, and pushes them further to the margins of the discussion. Russia, Canada, and Denmark are locked in a high-stakes battle over the Lomonosov Ridge, a colossal underwater mountain chain that could hold vast untapped resources. The drama escalated in 2007 when Russia made a bold move, planting its flag deep on the Arctic seabed, a stunt that sent shockwaves through the international community. Critics slammed it as a throwback to imperial conquest, reigniting territorial tensions that refused to die down. Now, the Arctic isn't just a frozen wilderness, it's a ticking geopolitical time bomb. But Russia isn't the only player stirring the waters. China is a wild card with ambitions as bold as the Arctic ice is thick. Calling itself a near-Arctic state, China forces its way into the conversation, stretching the boundaries of international law. Through its observer status in the Arctic Council, China promotes its Polar Silk Road project, a plan that could rewrite trade routes and shift global power balances. Yet, Western powers aren't buying it. Many accuse China of exploiting loopholes to stake claims far from its shores, warning that this could upend fragile agreements and unravel years of Arctic diplomacy. As if that weren't enough, China's dependence on Russia only adds fuel to the fire. While the two nations seem aligned, any crack in their alliance could send ripples across the Arctic, exposing China to sudden shifts in loyalty and policy. Critics fear this uneasy partnership might collapse under pressure, dragging other nations into a frigid battleground where alliances freeze and thaw without warning. The Arctic is transforming faster than any place on Earth. Its ice is vanishing, its resources are up for grabs, and its shipping routes could reshape global trade. But at what cost? Hybrid warfare scenarios loom large, with fears of Russia's seabed sabotage and increased submarine activity dominating security discussions. NATO's Arctic war drills highlight the region's growing militarization. Yet reports like brutal Arctic war warn troops remain unprepared for extreme conditions. Have you ever considered what activating NATO's Article 5 in hybrid warfare could mean? Fears of Russian seabed sabotage and rising submarine activity dominate security talks. NATO's Arctic war drills amplify regional militarization, yet reports like brutal Arctic war expose troop unpreparedness for brutal conditions. Are we truly ready for this fight? The U.S. also risks losing control of the Alaskan coastline, which stretches over 6,640 miles, more than the rest of the U.S. coastline combined. Russia already has 50 icebreakers, including nuclear-powered ones, while the U.S. only has 2 working icebreakers. This gap could leave America outmatched if a fight breaks out. War in the Arctic wouldn't just hurt trade. The ice there acts like Earth's air conditioner, reflecting sunlight and keeping the planet cool. Bombs, oil spills, or fires could melt more ice, raising sea levels and flooding U.S. cities like Miami and New York. If tensions keep rising, the Arctic might become the next big battleground, and the U.S. may not be ready for what comes next. Bottom line, if you're worried about rising costs, national security, or your family's future, the Arctic matters more than you think. Is the Arctic our next big frontier or a ticking time bomb? Drop your take in the comments. If you want more geopolitical truths you won't get on mainstream TV, hit like and subscribe to Politalysis. Stay tuned for our next deep dive. Knowledge is power.